Hi, and welcome back to PatientRx, patients who are also professionals in the pharma industry. I'm Jessica Krauser.
And I'm Tina Balb.
And we have an exciting and special episode to share with you. Back in April of this year, April 2024, Tina and I, along with thousands of other industry experts, we were at Assembia Specialty Pharmacy Conference in Las Vegas. Tina and I, along with my colleague, Jasmine Patel, had the opportunity to present a panel discussion, which we titled A Prescription for Change, A Patient's Voice. And so while we were there, we did our panel discussion, and there was so much more that I think we wanted to say and could have said, but you only get, 30 minutes or so to present to the audience there, or anybody who was able to attend. So I was really excited when we got the opportunity to use the Wynn Hotel has a podcast studio. And so we were able to utilize their studio to do an interview. Unfortunately, Tina, I know you weren't able to join, but you were doing much more important things like raising a lot of money and creating hope kits for cancer patients, which is amazing. But I was able to interview and talk to Jasmine further to really expand upon that panel discussion that we were having on how pharma companies need to incorporate patients into every part of the drug journey. But before we get into that discussion, like I mentioned on the first episode, we want to hear Tina's story. And this is one that she shared at Assembia. She was on another panel. She was on two panels at Assembia, very popular. And she really shed light on why having this patient voice is so important to us. So let's just take a minute and check that out.
So a year ago, a routine mammogram changed my life when it revealed that I had stage 3 invasive breast cancer that had already spread to my lymph nodes and surrounding tissues. Despite my 27 years experience in building patient access programs, clinical programs, counseling patients with cancer, nothing could have prepared me for this journey of becoming the patient myself. Following a double mastectomy, I underwent 5 months of chemotherapy, 35 rounds of radiation, and a secondary surgery to remove another potential tumor. Navigating the healthcare system became a daily battle. Even after a positive biopsy result, my insurance company denied my PET scans, CT scans, and bone scans, citing that they needed more evidence of cancer before they could approve the scans. My entire life was unraveling, and navigating the system I thought I knew well became exhausting. Chemotherapy was the most challenging ordeal I've ever faced. The side effects were brutal. Intense pain left me in tears for hours, significant weight loss, skin rashes, cognitive decline, neuropathy, and severe sores in my mouth and esophagus. I was ready to give up at that point. No more hospitals, no more doctor visits, no more treatments. I couldn't muster the strength to start the oral oncolytic and the barrage of new adverse effects I was going to experience. I knew it was going to keep me alive, but at what cost? I wanted quality of life over extension. Then I would look at my daughters and think, what would life be without their mother? And that was enough for me to keep going. In a parallel process, a last-minute decision was made by my healthcare team for another cancer-related surgery. I was thrown into navigating my care on two fronts, getting ready for another surgery and also trying to access my specialty oncolytic. 3 weeks later, I was finally able to access my oral oncolytic, and I have been in this space for 27 years and I could not get my oral oncolytic fast enough. My experience reframed everything I thought I knew as a consultant building these programs. I felt reduced to a number in a system focused more on efficiency than personalized care. The standard scripted questions asked during the welcome call failed to consider my extensive prior treatment history or current state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion. I was too overwhelmed to comprehend the information they tried to impart. No matter what counseling they tried to give me, I could not hear it, understand it. I was too exhausted. Patients build loyalty to brands and drug manufacturers through their experiences. With so many inconsistencies, I, as a patient, was left questioning why I would be loyal to a drug and trust the manufacturer of the drug that I was taking. The pharmacist and the consultant still had much to learn, but one thing was certain. It had driven home the urgent need for change in how we launch products, how we build patient access and support programs, and ultimately provide the right patient care. We must prioritize personalization and relationship building, ensuring every patient feels supported and understood. We chase medication adherence, but I truly feel that if we refocus on adapting our systems to meet the patients where they are in the journey, then they would naturally be adherent to their medication. As my journey continues to unfold, the pharmacist, the consultant, and now emerges as an advocate for change.
So after my panel discussion, I really felt, I did feel like I had been heard. After months of putting together my story and documenting everything that had happened, I felt heard. I subsequently have had a lot of folks reach out to me, and there is a genuine interest in incorporating the patient's voice and the patient's experience at different stages of the experience. And so it has led to a lot of phenomenal discussions around the patient and really bringing the patient forward. So after that panel discussion, I feel like it was the first step. I feel like this podcast is another step, and there's so many more steps to go along this path. But ultimately, my goal, and Jessica, I know your goal is to have a patient, for them to have a seat at the table at the beginning, during launch, post launch, and always have a seat at the table for every decision that a manufacturer makes. So I am very excited that we both were given the platform and the forum to talk about our experiences and to bring forth our thoughts around that.
Yeah. And like I said, I think, I know we could have talked longer up there as well. So that's why I was glad I had the chance to at least talk further with Jasmine, which we'll hear about in a second. And we really were able to get into the patient advocacy piece because that's what she does at the company I work for, which is Envision Pharma Group. She works with the patient advocacy groups to connect them with the pharma manufacturers to make sure that any of their questions are answered based on what stage of the game they're in with their drug. And so it was really interesting just to hear more depth around that. So let's take a minute and we'll take a look at my interview with Jasmine.
My background is in patient advocacy. I've been in this space for over 10 years. I have worked for patient organizations that raise awareness about different conditions. And through that, I've had a chance to work with hundreds of people living with life-threatening conditions, hear their stories, listen to their needs, and then help them tell that to audiences that are important to kind of change action, change mindsets with, whether it's the general public, whether it's with their healthcare providers, whether it's with family. And then especially with industry companies that are developing treatments for their conditions, and more importantly, even farther than that, payers, which are the bodies that are deciding whether or not they will cover the treatments for their conditions. I love what I do. It's very meaningful. It kind of reminds me about, why I entered this space. I love working for people, with people, and it's a really interesting field. But I think every day in our own lives, in our own industries, we're just caught up in our day-to-day lives, and especially in the pharmaceutical industry, it's a stressful environment. People are tasked with a lot of things. They're focusing on where they need to be tomorrow, next month, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, how they're going to push a medication through approval and make sure that it gets on formulary. But in the midst of all of this chaos, we have to be thinking about who these decisions are for, and it's for people living with these conditions. And so, the point you made, the ask that Tina made in her panel yesterday is bring a patient every step of the way, and she couldn't be more correct. Drug development is not a quick process. It takes years from kind of inception, the idea of developing a medicine, to putting it through clinical trial, preparing it to come out into the market. We have to make sure that we are listening to and bringing patients along the way.
So one of the things that I wanted to bring up yesterday that we kind of touched on at the panel, but I think we can really dive into it now is what you were saying about the even like the clinical trial aspect.
Yeah.
So obviously, not a scientist, right? So
neither am I.
but there, the people that are finding these and doing the research and finding the drugs and doing the testing and all that stuff, like it's amazing, necessary work.
Right.
But at what point can they bring a patient in to, or do they even know to do that? And here, let me give you an example. So I take a medication called, it's just the generic, it's just carbidopa levodopa. But there's a lot of pills, and I know I'm struggling with having to, take that many pills every day. Not struggling, but it's just annoying, I guess.
Yeah.
And like, I'm only 42. And I still have, this disease doesn't go away. So the medication only goes up. I know there's other therapies as well, but when do they have to have that conversation with the patient to be like, what type of mechanism or application do you want?
Yeah. I mean, it's an important question. You can bring a patient in anytime, right? But when is the most ideal time? When is the most important, the most valuable time to bring a patient in is at the very beginning, because to your point, you're thinking about these things long term. This is a condition that you live with, that you're going to live with the rest of your life. And, I'm sure along the way, your treatments are going to progress. Like, you might have to add another form of treatment into your treatment regimen. And there's a lot of things that are going on in your mind. I can't speak to what you experienced, Jess, and I think you're really brave for putting your story out there to different audiences.
I'm an open book.
I think it's important. And the more we allow people to be open books about what they're going through in their everyday lives, the more we will learn and listen from them. And, if that learning and listening is incorporated into, for example, company strategies and how they're developing their drugs, I mean, it becomes a much more meaningful solution to patients.
I really wanted to be there for that discussion with Jasmine, but I was, like Jessica referenced, I was part of a large fundraiser with the National Breast Cancer Foundation, and we were building hope kits for cancer patients currently undergoing cancer. And so I was at that event, but I really am glad that Jasmine had the opportunity to speak with you, because what she referenced about advocacy, I think that we really need to take note. There is a growing recognition and importance within the healthcare industry around the patient voice. And I feel like for a long time that patient voice has been lost. Everybody has ideas of what that is, but we've never truly incorporated the patient voice at every step. And so advocacy is gaining some traction within the industry. And at the end of the day, it really isn't just about developing drugs. It's about developing the right drugs for the right patients and also providing the right services for that patient so
Hmm.
that they can stay on the product and ultimately become well.
You know what I was kind of surprised at is the fact that that patient advocacy, the smaller emerging manufacturers might not, they probably don't have like a patient advocacy group like a large
Mm-hmm.
pharma manufacturer would.
Yeah.
Um, and even like at the large ones, like sometimes it's just it's a group that's it's
Right.
almost like it sits on their own. It's like, how is it so that it's infused and it's like the level playing field and it goes across
Right.
all the touch points? You know what I mean? Because like there's patient
Right.
services group, but it's like patient advocacy should not be like over here, they should be infused at every single part of the discussion as well, so if
Right.
it's a physical patient not able to be there, the patient advocacy group should be the ones advocating at every step of the way, right?
Right. And actually what surprised me as well, I mean, we talk about patient advocacy group within the pharma industry, but sometimes it's a single person
Yeah.
that's part of an advocacy team. I guess it's not even a team, but that has what surprised me also the most is large manufacturers really having just a single person or two people as
Hmm.
their advocacy arm. And so to me, that shows that maybe they don't value advocacy. Maybe they don't
Hmm.
value the patient voice. And that's the part that I feel needs changing
Yeah.
is like you said, let's infuse the advocacy arm of the manufacturer
Hmm.
eh, within every department. Let's make that part of the culture for the manufacturer. When you make the culture patient centric, then at the heart of every decision, whether it's patient access, payer access, whether it's distribution or anything in between, the patient is always put first because you've fostered a patient centric culture.
Right, right. And hopefully like people will start to see, and I know that there's case studies out there that it's like, bringing the patient in as early on as like the clinical trials, they benefit the entire way. So listening to the patients, bringing them in can lead to better clinical trial design, improved patient adherence, and ultimately what we're all out for, which is better health outcomes.
Right. Another thing that surprises me is there's just not enough patient advisory boards. Why is that? I mean, even the
Uh,
FDA has a patient advocate on their committees. So why is there very few patient
mhm.
advisory boards that happen? And if they do happen, it's way, 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 way afterthought. It's at the
Yeah.
end when the product is already in the market and they're having a problem,
Yeah.
or it's right before and all the decisions have already been made and there's no room to change anything.
What's interesting is when you said like with the FDA, like the House and the Senate both passed and the End Parkinson's Act. And so it's going to do essentially, I think, what the Alzheimer's, like what they did for Alzheimer's, is bringing all the right parties together from a,
Mhm.
private, public sector, like through a bill with the government. And from what I learned so far, like they're going to have, you know, different groups will have a seat at the table, different companies, scientists, doctors, FDA, like people from all the different government groups, et cetera. And then I was like, they're going to have, young onset Parkinson's, somebody who's had Parkinson's for a while, and a caregiver. And I was asking somebody about it, and I was like, so, like, how many people are they going to have? Like, thinking it's like a panel, and they're like, I think they're just choosing like one young onset person,
What?
like one. I know, I don't know for sure, but like that's what I thought I heard, and I'm like, really? So I'm hoping that they were wrong. Then that's part of the problem. Like to your point, like with companies, it's like, oh, we have one person. So like we're taking care of that. Like we got that covered. It's like,
No.
no, that's just one
Yeah.
voice. I mean, yeah, we're one
Right.
voice and one voice can make a change, but it's like, again, that's why I like this idea of podcasts. It's like how, we want to bring other people, like what ideas, what
Right.
questions, or what are you seeing? Because it can't just be the same, especially when you're at a company, you hear yourself, you hear it over and over and over. So it's like having somebody from the outside in helps. But yeah, I was like, oh, I hope
And
that's not true.
it can't be the check the box item
No,
either.
no.
Right. That's the frustrating part. I do feel quite often that it's a check the box item.
Yeah.
Um, and outside of cancer, with just other disease, chronic disease areas. I mean, we have, I have aging parents, and they've had
Hmm.
to access the healthcare system, and also some of these patient services, manufacturers, or even just some of the insurance services,
Hmm.
and it's been a struggle. It is,
Yeah.
even for somebody like me who is educated, who understands the system, it gets really hard to navigate.
Hmm.
And I always sit back and think there has to be a simpler way. Like the navigation piece is like, I want to pull out every hair. Uh,
Hmm.
and it's just, the navigation piece is really, really hard. And
Yeah.
and part of it is, once again, we make decisions in a vacuum, and we don't get the weigh in of the people that are actually going to use that
Hmm.
service.
So that's actually a good segue and good way to close out because that's what our next few episodes are going to be about. So talking specifically about specialty pharmacy, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into specialty pharmacy and get some insight from individuals in the industry, experts in the industry on the distribution, challenges, opportunities, as well as from a payer standpoint because it's challenging. And if it's challenging for us who we know the industry pretty well, I can't
Right.
imagine those who are not connected.
Right. And our hope is to bring on some experts that we could dive in deep around a lot of these issues. So,
Hmm.
some of the payer issues, formulary, how do
Yep.
formulary decisions get made? How do the step therapy process, how does that get determined, or prior authorization? Who creates these criterias? I mean, are these the invisible committees out there creating this criteria? How does this all go down? And on the
Hmm.
patient access side, if we think about patient services hub, outsourced versus insourced, what does that look like? What are we missing? What are the gaps?
Hmm.
And I think, one of the exciting things for me, a topic to talk about, is pipeline, the drugs, the innovation that's getting
Hmm.
ready to come, and the potential for cures for so many chronic diseases. And I definitely want us to dive into talking about some pipeline things that are happening.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a lot to talk about.
We do. We
That's why I'm
do.
so glad. And it's funny because it's like we always had a lot to talk about when we get on the phone. So it's just nice. It's like all we're doing is just recording it for other people to listen
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and comment and
And
hopefully like make something of it and move the needle forward in some way, shape, or form. So
absolutely. So today's takeaway, I would say, for those of you who are listening, is within the companies that you work for, find out about your advocacy arm and find out what they do. Because I'm pretty sure some of you have no idea if it even exists.
yeah, good point. Check out your advocacy and get back to us. Tell us what you found out.
Yeah. Give us some feedback.
All right. Well, that's all we have for today. So thanks again for tuning in.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.